I knew something was strange when the smartest girl in school invited me for coffee. Not just because she was the kind of person who calculated the quantum probabilities of milk swirling in her cup before taking a sip, but also because, let's be honest, she was so unbelievably out of my league that even imagining our social circles overlapping would require an advanced degree in theoretical physics. Her name was Syl, and she had a presence that made you feel like she existed on an entirely different frequency of the universe. Her violet eyes shimmered unnaturally. Iridescent markings flickered across her skin like constellations trying to form coherent sentences, and her voice carried an accent I could never quite place. That was because, as I would later discover, she had learned English through intercepted military broadcasts and old Earth soap operas. So when she approached me in the middle of my usual existential crisis, staring blankly at my unfinished astrophysics homework while slowly dying inside, I did what any rational person would do. I choked on my own spit. "Coffee?" she asked, resting her chin on her hand, her glowing tattoos pulsing faintly as if waiting for my response. I did a quick mental check of possible explanations. This was a prank. This was a bet. I had somehow slipped into an alternate reality where hyper-intelligent, ridiculously attractive alien girls found awkward human males inexplicably fascinating. Sure, I managed. Which brings us to the present, a neon-lit space cafe filled with interstellar students, the subtle hum of anti-gravity booze, and the vague scent of something that I strongly suspected wasn't legally classified as coffee. I sat across from Syl, gripping a cup of whatever mysterious liquid the vending machine had spat out, while she studied me with an expression that made me feel like a particularly interesting bacteria under a microscope. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "No." I blurted out too quickly. "Then why are you gripping your cup like it's the only thing keeping you from being sucked into a black hole?" I forced myself to loosen my fingers, which had turned an unsettling shade of white. "You just caught me off guard. You weren't expecting coffee?" "I wasn't expecting you to invite me for coffee." She tilted her head slightly, the glowing markings on her skin shifting with an almost organic fluidity. "Statistically speaking, you were the most interesting choice." There was something unsettling about the way she phrased that. Interesting how? She gave me a cryptic smile. Interesting in a way that made the probability of our interaction the most beneficial outcome for me. I stared at her for a long moment. "That sounds vaguely threatening." "Does it?" she asked, sipping her coffee with a level of grace that made my own caffeine dependence seem embarrassingly primitive. "I assure you it's not." I narrowed my eyes. "Are you running an experiment on me?" She exhaled softly, setting down her cup. "Not exactly. But I do need your help." Here it was. The part where the elaborate prank revealed itself. The part where I realized I was about to be roped into some bizarre alien betting pool. Or worse. The part where I'd be tricked into doing her astrophysics homework while she laughed at my fragile mortal brain. Instead, she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I need you to get me off this planet." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Syl glanced around before locking eyes with me, her expression filled with quiet urgency. "I need to leave. Discreetly. And I need your help to do it." I resisted the urge to laugh. Not because it was funny. Okay, maybe it was a little funny, but because I was almost certain I had misheard her. "You need me to help you escape?" "Yes." "Why?" She leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Because I'm being hunted." I did what any reasonable person would do. I immediately looked around, expecting to see someone in a dark trench coat and sunglasses, which, given the neon lighting, would have been hilariously impractical. Instead, I saw the same students I always did. Aliens of all shapes and species, some cramming for exams, others engaged in fierce games of quantum chess. No ominous figures lurking in the shadows. No covert assassins whispering into concealed communication devices. "Okay," I said carefully. "Who exactly is hunting you?" Her fingers traced the rim of her cup absent-mindedly. "The Galactic Royal Guard." I nearly choked on my coffee. "I'm sorry, what?" Her gaze met mine, unwavering. "I am Princess Sylvan of the Zetian Empire, heir to the Celestial Throne, and as of 3 days ago, officially dead." I stared at her. "Okay, I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. I have precisely 23 minutes before my absence is discovered, she continued, glancing at the clock, which means you have approximately 22 minutes to decide whether you're going to help me. I rub my temples. Just so I understand, you, a literal galactic princess, faked your own death and are now sitting here in a student cafe asking me to smuggle you off-world? Yes. Why me? She hesitated. Because you are statistically the least likely person to be suspected. I wasn't sure whether to be offended or flattered. Right. I exhaled. Okay. Do you have a plan? That, she admitted, is where you come in. Fantastic. I glanced at my rapidly cooling coffee, then at the glowing-eyed alien princess sitting across from me with an expression that was equal parts hope and barely concealed terror. I had a feeling my GPA was about to take a serious hit. I repeated the words in disbelief. A ship? Syl nodded, exasperated. Yes. And do you by chance own this ship? Define own. I groaned. Jill, it's there, and it's functional. She gestured impatiently. Isn't that enough? A distant boom echoed above us. Something heavy crashing, maybe a barricade being breached. No time to argue. I exhaled sharply. Fine. Lead the way. Syl gave a quick, sharp nod before sprinting forward into the darkness. And because my life had clearly spiraled into an absurdist tragedy, I ran after her. Running through underground tunnels of city you don't fully understand while being hunted by an Imperial death squad is, in retrospect, a deeply unpleasant experience. It's made significantly worse when you have no idea where you're going, and even less confidence that your guide actually does. The tunnel smelled like industrial-grade despair, with an undercurrent of something acrid that I strongly suspected was either a gas leak or whatever passed for sewage in a city built on gravity-defying architecture. The floor beneath us was slick with condensation, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the distinct skitter-skitter of something alive moving in the shadows. This is fine. I panted. Totally fine. Love sprinting for my life in abandoned infrastructure. Really great for the cardio. Syl didn't respond. She was ahead of me, moving with an alarming amount of urgency, her glowing patterns flickering erratically. She was processing something, probably running 100 different calculations in that terrifyingly brilliant mind of hers. Then, from behind us, the unmistakable sound of boots clanking against metal. They recalibrated their scanners, Syl said sharply. They'll be right on top of us in 3 minutes. I groaned. Awesome. You still sticking to that statistically feasible escape plan, or are we officially in improvisational panic mode? She stopped so suddenly I almost slammed into her back. I was about to demand why when I saw it. The tunnel ended in a sheer drop, and I mean sheer, a gaping, endless chasm of darkness, its bottom so far away that the air itself seemed to swallow the light. Somewhere far below, I could just make out the faint glimmer of industrial machinery, the telltale signs of an active spaceport buried deep beneath the city. Good news, Syl said. We found the lower docking bay. I turned to her slowly. And the bad news? There's no bridge. Fantastic. Just fantastic. I threw my hands up. Would have killed the ancient city planners to install some guardrails. Syl ignored me, already scanning the chasm, her pupils narrowing in concentration. There's a maintenance lift 40 meters down, if we can get to it. A blast of hot air and the whir of servos cut her off. We turned just in time to see the soldiers rounding the bend, weapons raised. Move! Syl yelled. I didn't have time to think, just react. She grabbed my wrist with an iron grip and jumped. For the record, this was not an act I consented to. The air rushed past me in a deafening roar, my stomach lurching somewhere into my ribcage as we plummeted toward the void. The lift platform was below, rapidly approaching. It took me a full 3 seconds to process that we were not, in fact, about to die a very messy death, because Syl had time to jump perfectly. The lift, old, rusted, and in motion, was creeping its way up toward the docking bay, which meant that instead of falling straight into the abyss, we landed hard on the unstable metal platform. It shuddered violently beneath our weight. I gasped for air, trying to reassemble my lungs. Still, I wheezed. A little warning next time. She yanked me to my feet. No time. Above us, the soldiers reached the ledge. One of them took aim. I felt the heat of the shot blaze past my shoulder, sizzling against the lift controls. The platform lurched, jerking to one side as sparks rained down around us. Not good, Sil muttered. Really? I hadn't noticed. The lift groaned again, one of its mechanical arms snapping free. The whole platform tilted. My balance went with it. I barely managed to grab the rail before I went over the edge. Sil, I gasped, scrambling for footing. Fix it. I am fixing it, she snapped, her fingers flying over the control panel. Above us, the soldiers recalibrated their aim. Another shot burned through the air, narrowly missing Sil's head. Not to rush you, I gritted out, but we are currently very shootable. The lift buckled. Sil did something complicated and definitely illegal. To the control panel, because suddenly the lift jerked downward in free fall. I screamed. Sil did not. The platform slammed to a stop seconds before it could become a pile of industrial scrap at the bottom of the docking bay. I felt my knees, gasping. I hate today. Sil pulled me up before I could complain more. Come on. The docking bay was dimly lit and massive, a sprawling expanse of old, disused ships abandoned by people with significantly better options. The air smelled like oil, metal, and desperation. And in the middle of it all, there it was, Sil's ship, except it was a wreck. And I don't mean needs a tune-up kind of wreck. I mean one wing missing, engine hanging off by a thread, hull looking like it survived a meteor storm kind of wreck. Sil, I said very carefully, this ship is dead. It's mostly dead, she corrected. I turned to her, aghast. That is not the reassuring distinction you think it is. Another blast of energy hit the ground near us. The soldiers had arrived. No more time. Sil sprinted toward the ship, up the loading ramp as the engine sputtered to life. I had approximately 3 seconds to decide between staying put and getting arrested, or worse, or putting my life in the hands of a very stressed-out alien princess with a questionable definition of functional starship. I ran for the ship. The ramp began to close behind me as I stumbled inside, gasping for breath. Sil was already at the cockpit, flipping switches, her hands moving with an urgency that made my stomach churn. The ship shuddered. Then, against all logic, it rose. Outside, the soldiers scrambled. One of them raised their rifle. Too late. With a final roar of engines, the ship blasted out of the docking bay, straight into the open void of space. I collapsed against the nearest wall, breathing hard. Sil exhaled, hands steady on the controls for the first time. For a second, I thought we'd made it. Then something pinged on the radar. Sil went still. What? I asked, voice hoarse. What was that? She swallowed. Then, quietly, they brought a warship. My heart stopped.